Okay, let's talk about the preseason a little bit. If my voice sounds off, that's because it is. I have a cold or something right now. So let's start with Ben Simmons. He looks like Ben Simmons. And we saw that early on where he had a play in the post and he had this beautiful skip pass to, I want to say it was Joe Harris in the opposite corner. I don't even remember if the shot went in, but I was like, ooh, that was pretty. And speaking of Ben in the post, we did see that a bit. Now, before I get to that, I should say he was screening and he was the facilitator in handoff actions quite a lot, which I think a lot of us expected with Kyrie and KD specifically. There was a little thing in there with Patty Mills that I think they can build on as well. But for Kyrie and KD specifically, most of the time the Sixers were switching the actions, so Ben was not able to get a dive to the rim all the time. But, and I will mention the post again in a second here, but there was one time where he ran an action with KD very early in a possession, and the Sixers actually brought two to the ball, and Ben did have some daylight on a drive, and then the help came over, and he was in the post, and then he threw another really, really good pass to Joe Harris, who was in the opposite corner. Joe Harris did not make that shot, but that's what Ben Simmons can do. Anyway, on to the post-up some more. So he did have that hook shot, as well as that really not pretty looking turnaround jumper that everybody's been talking about so far. But he also had a couple of plays. I remember one specifically where he had a switch off of screening for Kyrie, and he had a smaller guy on him. I don't remember who it was exactly. And the potential for the entry pass was there. Kyrie did not throw it. He swung it to Joe Harris, who also could have made an entry pass, although that one would have been a little more difficult to Ben. But those opportunities are there. It's a matter of looking for Ben in those moments, Ben being aggressive and demanding the ball. I mean, that's part of this thing, right? It's like, how much is Ben going to insert his personality onto the Nets to where it's like, hey, man, I've got a mismatch. Give me the damn ball. He was bringing the ball up a lot, which I did like. I think that's step one in him not getting lost in the shuffle of the KD and Kyrie show. And of course, there's going to be times where those guys are going to isolate, and that's fine, but let's just not forget about Ben. And he did have that one play where it was early in a possession and he just attacked downhill and he got fouled and he ended up missing both free throws. But like, they've got to have that too. We can't just only have screen setting and handoff. Sometimes there's got to be times where it's like, Ben, just go in a straight line to the basket, because we all know you can. Next, I want to go to the Magic game. Specifically, I want to talk about Paolo. So first off, I think Orlando was really feeling not having Fultz because he's their best passer, and also not having Franz, so the spacing was a little rough, and the Grizzlies were switching a lot of the time, and he had Dylan Brooks on him, so Paolo, it wasn't the ideal first experience in the NBA. There was one time where Steven Adams switched onto him, and he actually got a little locked up by Steven Adams, so take that for what you will. Paolo did have a couple of deep two-pointers that I wasn't the biggest fan of. He also did have one dunk where he kind of just went through like two dudes and dunked it on somebody else, and it's like, yep, that's Paolo. But there were also a couple of possessions where, he kind of committed to a drive and then he lost the dribble, or there was one where he got stripped from behind by, I believe, Conchar. The Magic were also going with the Bamba Wendell front court in that game, which is something they did a lot last year. And when Markelle Fultz is playing, it's most likely going to be Fultz, Suggs, Paolo, Franz, Wendell, and so the spacing should clear up a little bit more. But similar to Ben, there's also some post-up stuff to talk about with Paolo. There was one possession where I think Zaire Williams was switched onto him, or it might not even have been a switch. And Paolo just immediately looked to back him down, and I believe he drew a foul out of him as well. And there were also a couple other times where he could have gotten an entry pass, but the pass never came his way. So while I'm sure he would have loved to have had a better game, I think there were still things to be happy about. And of course, look, it's one game. Now, with that said, let's talk about Jabari Smith Jr.'s debut. This Rockets-Spurs game was not on League Pass, so I had to just wait until the highlight showed up on YouTube. Jabari's first basket was from Şengün operating at the top of the key with a little bit of action around him, and then Jabari cut to the rim. That's beautiful. He was also the recipient of many catch and shoots as he was 5 for 8 from 3, and yeah, that's what Jabari Smith can do. And you can immediately see the difference between when it was in Summer League and it just has more of a improvisational feel to the offense versus here where it's more structured and suddenly Jabari's getting open looks. Like it's an Eric Gordon pick and roll up top and then Jabari's spotting up in the perfect spot to where he can receive the pass because that's where the help's coming from, Next up, let's talk about the Lakers. So Westbrook, he had a couple of plays where he just kind of put his head down and attacked, including that one where he took De'Aaron Fox off the dribble in the corner and just kind of bullied through him. That's certainly a good sign early on. The thing that I most noticed is how deep of a drop Anthony Davis was in on defense. Now, granted, that was on De'Aaron Fox, and I mean, you dare De'Aaron Fox to beat you with pull-ups. But there was also that report from about a week ago where Darvin Ham pretty much was like, yeah, we want Anthony Davis dropping on screens to allow him to kind of be our version of Brook Lopez, a more athletic version, of course. Besides that, my other takeaway from that game was that Keegan Murray continues to look like he's been in the league for 5 years already. And not just in the sense of the catch and shoots and all that, but his first bucket, he takes Pat Bev off the dribble, beats him with a line drive, just dribble, and then he makes a floater over Damian Jones. So Keegan's already showing some interesting signs of doing more than being a catch and shoot guy and just finishing plays. And also that lob that he had to Rashawn Holmes in the third quarter where he started from the corner and then got the handoff from Holmes, that was pretty intriguing. Also, Kevin Huerter's going with a headband. Not totally sure about it just yet. Now let's go to the Blazers and Clippers game. There was a few takeaways. Number one, Kawhi Leonard in his first preseason game in however long is already hunting Anthony Simmons on mismatches. It's like, okay, Kawhi, we're just not going to be in chill mode at all, I guess. With that being said, Anthony Simmons actually held up kind of well in a couple of them. They started Reggie Jackson, but they also had a lineup where Reggie and John Wall played together, and that was actually one of their lineups where they went with no center. Besides that, it was Zubats and Moses Brown getting the minutes at the 5 spot a little bit. When John Wall was out there was like a 2 or 3 minute stretch where it was a pick and roll from him pretty much every single time. And as for the Blazers, so number one, they had Nurkic switching screens, and well, now I'm officially even more confused when it comes to what Chauncey Billups' plan is defensively, because look, basically every time I mentioned the Blazers this offseason, it always came with a mini rant of their tendency to trap on the ball or just play really high up on screens and put their whole defense in rotation, and it just didn't go over well last season, right? So they had Nurkic switching on to almost everybody in the first game here, and I don't think it's a sign of they're definitely going to do that when the regular season starts, but it's certainly Chauncey being like, let's see what this looks like. And switching does help keep your defense out of rotation, but it's Yusuf Nurkic switching on to perimeter players. I just think there's a shelf life on doing that sort of thing, right? As for the rest of the Blazers, Damian Lillard's back. We already saw it. The Clippers had to play high up on screens when they were having their centers in the game. When they weren't in there, they were switching a lot more often. But when Zubats was in there, he had to play high up on Dame. He had to play high up on Simons. It opens up drives for Nurkic, or it could also open up the pull-up three. The Blazers should be good on offense. I do want to talk about Jeremy Grant, because, that's another addition of this offseason, right? He took Reggie Jackson off the dribble one time in a play that had the Clippers defense kind of set up. It was a little bit of transition, but they got back pretty well. And those are the moments where it's like, hell yeah, let's go. He did also have this one play where he took it himself on an ISO very early in a possession and shot a long 2 over Kawhi with 19 seconds left on the clock. And I had this moment of ooh, I hope that's not a trend. As for Thunder Nuggets, Josh Giddey was 2 for 2 from 3, and when I look at it, I will admit, I don't know exactly what it is for why his jumper looks different to me. Maybe it's just a placebo that I'm putting on myself and it actually doesn't look different, but I feel like it looks different, and it looks a little smoother. And as for Denver, well, of course, Jamal Murray is back, and that's awesome. There was one play that kind of summed it all up. It was in the second quarter where it was a Murray-Jokic 2-man action where eventually it led to Jokic screening for Murray, and then the help collapses, and then it's MPJ in the corner. And it's like, hey, good luck, man, because no matter what you want to do there between bringing 2 to Murray or switching that or dropping for the sake of not giving Jokic the role, there's going to be something there the Nuggets can do. Good luck guarding them.